So yeah, just a couple of interesting Glen Scotia's kind of picked up through a couple of kind of different months and that with local shop picks. The festival released this year, SNWS and What Whiskey's blended malt, blended Campbelltown malt. So take a guess what is mostly in that kind of thing. So we're going to start off as the blue one. I've got the order there. It's so going the blue, green, yellow. Yeah, blue, green, yellow, red, purple, and we'll go through them as we're there. It's not really done as a blind taste, and it was just more out of convenience and saving you having to read my atrocious handwriting. So blue one first. That's it there. The What Whiskey, 5-year-old Campbelltown blended malt. Not really too much information about it, but imagine either first fill bourbon or refill bourbon from appearance of it. Yeah, just a couple of flavour notes, but we'll go into that after we've tried it rather than saying what someone else thinks first.
Really, really light on the nose.
Yeah.
Which is not a bad thing, right? And a great starter from that point of view.
Definitely
very
soft.
sweet.
Yeah. I think Glen Scotia kind of does it quite often up here, quite sweet, especially like it's unpeated styles. Anyway, the one that kind of stands out for that was that 11-year-old sherry double cask, but a lot of people viewed this kind of being kind of sickly sweet as well, both in some ways.
Sorry, are we starting with the blue one?
Yes, we are. Blue one to start with.
Cool. Cheers.
And that's the What Whiskey. So it's 5 years old. Campbelltown blended malt, and so then likely heavily influenced by Glen Scotia. Jade's there. I need to remember to actually keep an eye on the waiting room because I'm not used to being on that side of it.
What's the ABV on it? It's quite fiery to start with, really light on the nose.
These are all at cash strength, so this one is 57.1%.
Ah, right, okay, that makes sense. It caught me by surprise because I wasn't expecting that because it doesn't smell like that at all. And then first kind of wee sip straight away, and I've got a little bit of the cold, so maybe my tongue's a bit more sensitive or something. I don't know, but yeah,
I definitely feel
setting the back of my mouth on fire.
Yeah. Jade, just so you're aware, that's the starting on the blue one, just the What Whiskey blended malt. My bottle just started there. So, I mean, they're not saying too much about this one. It's just like typical kind of light or style notes they're referring to in it. Vanilla, olive oil, honey, faint peat and apricots. You know, like it is maybe what you'd expect from first fill bourbon, matured, unpeated, mildly peated whiskey. I don't really find the peat myself in here. Let's see what's like with a little bit of water. As well as I think young whiskey, you do tend to find that like flavour wise it can be fine, but it can be great in any way. But like more often than not, if you're going to get one that's got a bit of heat to it, younger whiskey tends to kind of bring that along, kind of shows it off a little bit more than something older, especially at that higher ABV. What's everyone else thinking of it so far?
I'm getting quite a lot of fruit on mine, actually, quite a lot of peach and nectarine, apricot, those sorts of fruits. And on the nose, there was slightly coastal for me, but slightly less so on the palate. But, I'm not surprised it's young, but it's nice, and it's quite a long finish for me, actually, quite like a fruity and pastry finish.
I did a couple of drops of water, and that really brought out kind of the lighter fruits type thing. And like I say, it was a bit fiery at me at the start, bit of water, and then certainly that sort of light fruitiness, peaches and apricots maybe.
I find that almost too fiery without some water. I'm going to add some water to it now. It's nice texture though.
I'm adding a decent bit of water as well. I think it is like one of those that a lot of people, like to make that point. Oh, they love the whiskey at cask strengths. Glen would complain if it's too hot. Well, be aware if you're on cask strength whiskey add some more. Like that's what a lot of people. You find some people just don't want to do that. They want to have it as it is, no matter what. You're like, no, if it's too hot for you, don't blame it. Try it with some water. It might be one of your favourite whiskies with some water. But that's it fits where I wanted it to be, quite a light, easy to drink one to begin with. Apart from like the heat's there, but adding some water goes tempers it a bit better. It's that lighter, fruitier thing. Whereas everything else, apart from like the next dram, goes into much more richer style casks. Your sherry cask maturation and finishing. The first two are all more bourbon style, bourbon led.
I'm just adding more and more water to it. I still find it quite kind of hot with the water.
Definitely.
Maybe it's a highball. This might be ideal.
It is for I guess I've done myself putting this out as I think we have split the cask from my understanding. So there's only 150 bottles being released of this for the Campbelltown Malts Festival. And I think what they did is they did half the barrel there and then put the rest of it into a smaller cask to finish it for a bit of time. So I don't know what's going to come later down the line. Maybe that will help temper it as well, being put into that additional cask. But this was kind of interesting to me. It's just young Glen Scotia being the spirit character from it, rather than being there's a lot of Glen Scotias, especially the single cask coming from shops and retailers. They're just heavy finishes, which nothing wrong with, but it's nice to get two sides of it, the actual spirit style and then how that works with different casks. And I'm very much looking forward to trying some of these other ones because this is the first time I've tried any of these apart from the festival release. So
most of the Glen Scotia I've had up to now, they've been the festival editions, and they've all had a kind of very flavourful cask finish, and difficult to kind of work out what the underlying new make is like. And this is probably good, got closer to the new make than the other one.
Yeah, 100%. Their new make's quite interesting. Actually, I remember trying it. It's probably one of the nicer new makes I've tried. Just being, they do make a very light, fruity new make, which makes sense. At least on their unpeated style. We didn't try what the peated style new make was. It was just when we did the tour of the distillery, which is always nice. You don't always get to try new make at distilleries as well. It's nice when you do get that opportunity to see the spirit itself.
When did you do the tour, Shay?
It would have been end of June, beginning of July. Okay. Me and my friend went to Campbelltown for Sunday to Thursday. It was good.
How did you get there? Did you road?
Bus.
Sorry?
Bus.
Yeah. We did it years ago, and that was the way to do it, was get the bus from the town all the way down.
Yep.
A slight warm-up en route.
yeah, a couple of cans.
And then lunch and round the distilleries. We stayed overnight and did golf in the morning and came back up again. But it was great. It was great. So it's a long bus trip, but it actually wasn't that bad. I think we got the 6 o'clock in the morning bus, and then the 6 p.m. bus the next day to get home for 11 or something like that.
I really like the way we did it, of doing it a bit longer and spread out. Just not massively, but there's a lot of things we wanted to go do and see while we're there. So rather than just trying to do it in a day, do it in 2 days, spread it out, enjoy some time there and some chat with people there. And we made the point to kind of do some of those experiences that you'd really want to do. I remember thought about it before with a friend of the Quality Ball tour and just being that's too much for me. I don't want to do that. I would love to do it, but I don't want to spend that I'll maybe do it later down the line, and then like had that later down the line, just as we were getting closer to going. You know what? We're already going to Campbelltown. If there's this is the best time to just go do that. I can swing it. I can make it happen. You know, let's just make it. Let's go for it.
You did the Cadenheads tasting while you were there as well, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, I'm Cadenheads club member as well, so it's free for me to do that one. And to be honest, if you're going to Campbelltown, you're planning doing the warehouse tasting, you're as well just to join the Cadenheads club anyway. Because it's 50 quid to join. It's not a yearly thing. It's just 50 quid to join, flat fee, and you get 2 free warehouse tastings a year.
Okay.
So you go to Campbelltown twice and do that tasting twice. That's your right. You made your money back from that.
Yeah, I've noticed that the more water I add to this one, the more lemony it becomes.
Yeah, I'll see.
But it doesn't knock the mouthfeel too much, does it? You've still got that nice sort of buttery, creamy mouthfeel with it. I think it takes water really well, actually.
What's the still style at Glen Scotia? Is it kind of high neck, or is it kind of what is it, worm tub or anything fancy like that?
They are shell and sugar condensers. So it is your kind of that helps making it lighter spirit. It's not worm tubs, and they are quite like sizable stills, like a longer neck. I can't remember what how the line arms were on it. If they were, I think they were descending thing. Still, I did think they were ascending line arms. Just can't try and remember from the time we were there. But as like going around there, it's a proper factory of it. Like you go into the back, like the noise at some parts around, especially around the stills. You know, like it's right in production, which I love when I go to distilleries like that. You know, I don't care for the distilleries that sit. I don't mind it here and there, but like I'd much rather sit at a distillery that's wanting to like just get on with it, and yeah, let people come around and see, but like we're not making it look all fancy for you, or like make it pleasing for you
unfiltered.
To see. Yeah, like a tourist trap kind of thing.
You must have loved Springbank then.
Yeah, Springbank was great. Some of the nonsense, like going around in the Valley of Balter, one bit like we're in the mill, and it's like just written on like little bits of equipment, just if you can't be bothered emptiness at the end of your like after the end of the run, don't worry about it. Some other dafty will have to do it for you, that kind of thing. Just them hating on each other, just at the middle of it, like get back that production member of the team as well, just making that point about hating on the like, oh yeah, they love everything being traditional. They just don't want us to live that long. That's all it is. That's like the way they were putting it across. Like, all right, no worries. If you're right, we can move on to the next. I'm just keeping a wee bit aside for later. Come back and trial them side by side after, see how they compare against each other after you've had the next. So the next one is the SNWS. It's green, I should say. So that's your SNWS Defies Belief, 93.168. So it is Glen Scotia, 18 years old and fully matured in refill ex bourbon barrels. So again, it's a more mature whiskey refill cask, which I think can quite often suit older whiskey and particularly Glen Scotian styles. But I've not tried this one, so we'll see. Maybe I'm like talking nonsense. We'll find out. There's a lot more of that kind of salty character on this one immediately.
Yeah, I get a real kind of salted caramel in the nose. It's, like you say, salty and sweet, but not like a big sherry bomb sweetness. It's and different from the blend there, which was much sort of lighter. I think was it Nick? I think was talking about apricots, or Patrick. I can't remember.
I think salted caramel is a great call on that, actually.
And then tongue, you really get a big kind of salty kick. Those maritime ones, straight away.
I think this is probably, of the lineup, probably actually the best for showing that the Glen Scotia style in its own. The other one was more kind of lighter, fruitier, whereas this is kind of what Glen Scotia's sort of talked about as.
Famous funk is there in abundance on this one, isn't it? Not so much in the first one, but absolutely ruling the glass on this.
What was the ABV, Shay? Sorry, I didn't hear.
Yeah, I probably didn't say 57.3, and this one's 18-year-old. SMWS has some nice, like the usual nonsense that they have on their bottles. So this defies belief, and the kind of little paragraph I've got on it: paraffin fire starters on a peat hearth, in a black house cooking lamb, surf and turf, followed by a yeasty salinity with a balanced sharpness.
I was about to say exactly the same thing. Yeah.
Normally, though, they write those things and they are hilarious, but quite often you read them and go, "Oh yeah, I can get that," but I don't get paraffin or peat or any of that kind of.
I get the paraffin fire. Yeah, definitely something kind of smoky, fuely, spirity there. Paraffin fire is, for me, is a good note. And marzipan, like kind of salty marzipan.
I get a kind of nutty bit at the back, so maybe marzipan, almonds and stuff on the back of that. Definitely, there's a caramel stuff in the nose, quite sweet. Not sweet on the tongue. Definitely the salty part on the tongue, bit of orange, and then kind of nuttiness at the end. And as with the previous one, actually, lovely mouthfeel. It's nice and thick and oily on my tongue. And for the same ABV, roughly, doesn't need a drop of water for me. I could quite happily take that one. To be fair, the Watt whiskey as well, that was the first dram of the night, so maybe opening with a 55 caught me by surprise.
That was it. It was in the kind of sort of, like this is a kind of stacked lineup of drams, but we'll see. That's why I've kind of made the point of leaving that first one, have a little bit, come back to it, after we've tried other things and see, if it was a difference of viewpoint, especially for myself, even just, it's always nice to kind of leave a bit in the glass and come back to. This was, I think, the one I was most looking forward to out of the lineup, as much as it's like second, the other ones, the reason they're after this is more because of where I think I think if you had them first and came back to this, it'd be overpowered.
Have you got in your glass tonight, Frank, then, as much as it's maybe not one of these Glen Scotias?
I started off with Gordon MacPhail Ball Blair, 10-year-old, which I picked up quite cheap. So and it's a great starter. And later on, the Victoriana, which is a Glen Scotia.
Yep.
And if you take your time, I do have another Glen Scotia, which is a distiller's edition that I picked up at the distillery last year when I was there with Tom, Ryan, Richard McNee, the brand ambassador for McMurray, and Tom Lindsay. We had a private tour on Glen Scotia. It was great.
Nice. Yeah, Victoriana's lovely. I've had a bottle of that before. It was really nice.
What made me really excited I had this before, I had the bottle already for a while, but before I went to Campbelltown. But what made me really excited to try this when I get, just try it, was doing the tasting at Glen Scotia. We did the limited edition tasting. And they're like, we've not really got any limited editions in stock right now, apart from one. So we've got a couple end ofs, a bottle of it. So you can take your pick of which ones you want to try. And one of them was 20-year-old fully matured and refilled bourbon. And that was okay, yeah, that was absolutely fantastic. And then made me go, I've sitting on some, so it's not too far away from that. Let's see how much, hopefully, if it's anywhere near as good as what that tasted, more than happy. I did like glad about Glen Scotia, the tour and the taste and the chat with the folk at the distillery was great. The only thing that I found a little bit And I guess you find that quite a few distilleries is just a shop in terms of like pricing for like the shop special editions, limited editions. It's just a bit much for everything. It seemed like, either the festival ball only had was, I don't know, like 12 to 14 years. It was over 120 quid. Like, really, but especially when you look back at, only a couple of years ago, the 14-year-old Tawny Port, like the standard like festival bottle we did, that was absolutely fantastic and not over 120 quid. Always a bonus.
Yeah, that's a bit pricey. If the best distillery to go to for the distillery only bottles is Glen Murray.
Yeah.
Who are now £60, I think, as opposed to 55, which they were in Easter. But hand filleds in there. There's always a couple that are 60 quid, and then normally one that's like 90, 95, which is maybe a bit older, but magnificent value when you're in that place. And it's not the only one, but it's just one that I've been to. If you're 100 only, Bruichladdich I always thought was quite pricey.
Especially like there's 50 CL. 50
mils, yeah. So when you walk in, you say, "Oh, look, 75 quid. That's quite good," and then you find out it's a 50 as you filled it and walked away. So you just got to keep your eye on that.
Well, just keep an eye on any distillery only bottle. Last May, I entered Deanston, and they did have a distillery only bottle. I think it was 135 or so. And they had some of the previous batch. Only 4 of them remain, and it was 70. So just keep an eye, not to the regular one, but see if they have something of previous batches. Might surprise you.
I was really happy with like Springbank, as much as it, how much of a shit show going there in the morning can be with got there. We went for a 10 o'clock tour on the Monday. So, we were going there for all the time it opens because we had the tour. And there's 4 folk in front of us and none of them were there for the tour. That kind of thing. And got in and it's like an absolute frenzy of folk try to get up to the cage. I was like, I'm taking a step back. Like, I'll see us later on, see if there's anything decent. And when we left, there wasn't really anything that caught my eye. There was like things of like, all right, it's what limited to 1 ball per customer per week from the cage stuff at that time. So you're kind of sitting there going, I'm not, just because it's like there's something there, I'll come back later and see if there's something that's of more interest. Quite glad that, because when we came back, it was a 15-year-old refill rum Springbank, and it was 75 quid, which I think is kind of pretty reasonable for what that is. Though their pricing model's kind of a bit strange for the they're like duty paid sample bottles, as they're calling them. It's up to 11 years old is £60, and then 12 to 15 is 75. So if you get like a 12-year-old, you're 75 for a 12-year-old isn't absolutely atrocious, but it's to have the same price for what is a 12-year-old or a 15-year-old, it seems just a bit strange. Like, not complaining too much, but you'd be a bit more, I guess, a bit more bummed if you picked up the 12 and I could have just had the 11, it would have been 15 quid cheaper. But that's dependent on what's actually available in the shop on any given day.
Have you tried the one that you bought, the rum finish?
Yeah, I have. I really liked it. Really kind of quite, again, Springbank can be quite tropical in the first place, but it's kind of highlighting that style of thing, even going to that kind of mango notes in it. I've only tried it once so far. It was only last week, I think, tried it. But end up being kind of quite lucky with getting a couple of Springbanks, so there might be a tasting coming up soon that has a good couple of J&A Mitchell products in it. So what's everyone thinking of this one?
Want to spend some time with this, isn't it? It's one where you're trying to taste it and it's just not enough because you want to spend some real time exploring it. It's really, really complex. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, this one kind of similar to the previous one for me in that adding water really brought out the fruit quite a lot more. I get kind of sumac and grapefruit in this one after water, whereas before the water was more kind of salted caramel, ice cream kind of thing. Yeah, I think you're right. This one needs a bit of time.
I think on the palate, it's quite vegetal.
Yeah, it's got something a bit different on the palate. It's quite different. Vegetals may be a good word. I'm not going to go as far as broccoli or asparagus, but
and even at that, like at the age of 18 years old, I think I still got that quite noticeable Glen Scotia kind of spicy note that quite a few have, especially at the end. It's not as prominent as some of like the double cask or the, in particular, the one I found that kind of very prominent was that 11-year-old sherry double cask or the 12-year-old recharred oak and cherry casks. That was very noticeable in those, but this one still got it, and even as I say, being that much older, you kind of expect it. Maybe some
the balance with the mouthfeel is really good, though, isn't it? Because you've got that white pepper sort of kick, but also that waxy paraffin wax kind of thing, and they play off each other really well. So I haven't tried it with water yet. You know, when you like a whiskey as it is, and you're worried that you might damage it.
What age did you say that was, Shay?
18 years old.
18.
Yeah, it's.
I think given that, doesn't it? It drinks younger than 18, I would say.
I think that's likely just as well. It's like refill character as well, like refill oak. It's not a big first fill bourbon 18-year-old or sherry oak or whatever. It's that a more tired cask. So it's still spirity even in an older age. If folk want to, we can come back to that one later anyway, to go on to the yellow. So that's the Royal Mill Whiskey 8-year-old Oloroso. So that's here. So this is Royal Mill Whiskey's, Robbie's Whiskey Merchants, I should say. What? Hold on, I'm looking at the wrong one. Better just check. Did I pull them the wrong way? Well, that's the question, more or less. So so Royal Mill Whiskey's Oloroso cask, 8 years old, 56.2% ABV, and unpeated Glen Scotia. So I've seen quite a few recently. Shops have had Glen Scotia picks of late, and most of them tend to be at that 8-year-old mark. So I think that's maybe just a kind of common thing for them when they're doing their kind of single cask program. Is a lot of them end up being that age right now. Don't know if they've got much option of getting S and O's on that, because everywhere had the 8 years old I saw. To like, Robbie's got one, Royal Mill got one, Archie when we were at in Campbelltown, they had their own one as well. It was just first fill bourbon. They're all unpeated. Like, all really nice, but just interesting to see so many shops having 8-year-old Glen Scotia as a shop pick all around the same time. Let's actually try this all one, make sure.
Yeah, for me, there's quite a lot going on in the nose here, but it'll be different kind of layers of smell there.
Again, that's like the sherry finish they've done on this will help kind of just add. I guess one of the easier ways to add complexity to a whiskey is to just layer that cask finish on top. If you do it well and integrate it, it can be absolutely fantastic, and it means that you've got a little bit more. You can have a bit more depth in a younger whiskey.
Didn't get the nose I was expecting from an Oloroso cask, though. quite nutty.
The big anti-sherry person on the nose, that smells great. To kick off with, I'm like, oh, here we go. Look, it's nice and light. And to be fair, that's not bad at all, because sherry for me is normally really hard work. But that was quite nice. That's quite light.
Yeah, it's quite balanced. But for me, the first thing I got from this was fresh emulsion paint. Quite spirity, but then that kind of quickly got into kind of more vegetable, kind of like the previous one. It was kind of beans, kale, something vegetative in there. And then it kind of fades into lemon drizzle cake in the end. So yeah, quite interesting.
I mean, going off the colour of it, you can see that it's not a heavy, rich, dark coloured sherry. I think they've had in a lot of their finishes, they've got a little bit of restraint on it. They're not doing like turbocharged heavy, it's daft amount of sherry still in the barrel looking like thing. It's like a year finish. They're not doing or at least for the Robbie's Whiskey Merchants, it was a year. I don't know if the other one was, but I imagine it likely will be, since so many of them came out around the same time. They'll have been very done in that similar way of like 7 years and then put into something else, or kept in the same cask as 8-year-old just bourbon. I still got that though. Again, even with the sherry, I still got that Glen Scotia spice there.
Mm.
Just a bit of kind of richness and kind of chocolatiness at the end as well.
There is a chocolatey note, isn't there?
Yeah.
It doesn't taste like I was expecting it, actually. It's struggling to put my finger on that.
Sorry, I'm a bit behind. What colour are we on now?
We're currently on the yellow. The Robbie's
Cool.
Royal Mill whiskies. I keep getting them confused because I've just got it wrote down as like RMW and RWM, which, nice and easy to get them mixed up every time you try and say them. So this is the Royal Mill whiskies exclusive.
Chocolate hobnobs on the palate. Which is a good thing.
I'm getting quite a lot of espresso from that. Somebody else said chocolate, but for me, more kind of coffee espresso. Nice.
Yeah, I never really pick up coffee too much unless it's like so far in that direction. I generally don't like it because I'm not a big coffee fan. So more often than not, I'll pick it up as like a kind of darker chocolate. I think often, and at least in terms of tasting whiskey, they are almost interchangeable to some degree. Like coffee, to me, often ends up just being like a very intense chocolate and whiskey. Even though then I don't like coffee, but I'm happy to eat chocolate. That's no problem. I think the only thing that I dislike about the single casks that they've put out have been just where they're priced at. I think they're just slightly more than what I'd like them to be. Sitting at 70 quid for the single cask. Yeah, it's at cash rents and everything. And the way things are generally going right now, it's not the worst value out there. But you'd have liked to have seen it that 10 quid less. But you're always going to say something like that, aren't you? You're always going to like it to be that little bit cheaper.
It's cheaper than it's going to be.
Yeah. Especially given some of Glen Scotia's recent things, they see the 20-year-old, or I don't know if it's 20 or 22-year-old, that they were advertising that they're doing through ballot. And it's 420 something quid they're trying to sell at that. You're like, what?
Happily drink that at 65 quid. Quite happily.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I think it's I would just like it to be a wee bit cheaper than what it is. it's about worth it, and I was happy to pick up, especially I can't have in my head going, oh, it'd be close to our Glen Scotia tasting and all that, so like you can put it out there and show it to a good couple of people. But yeah, it just seems like Glen Scotia, 8-year-old whiskey at cash strength, you could, I think like £60-65 would be reasonable. 70 is just nudge above. And I say it's strange for Glen Scotia, where they are picking up popularity. They're still not that. I don't think they're in a position where, obviously it is selling, they're making whatever out of it, but I don't see them in the same way of how they could sell, like, they're saying it's a luxury product, in terms of, not a luxury product, but a luxury, in that kind of luxury marketing, like things like a lot of Diageo brands and all that, how they are kind of pushing that. I don't see Glen Scotia in that same area.
Yeah, I guess the whole Loch Lomond group is generally quite good value across the board. Don't see them pushing the prices up, not yet anyway. I guess the business is focused on a particular market segment, and they're not going for the ultra premium side.
Yeah.
But that's it. They'll all nudge up, but I don't think they're going to go up like a couple of the Diageo ones that you'd mentioned. Yeah, they'll all nudge up just because costs are going up, as opposed to just try to price themselves into a different place. And I don't think Glen Scotia and Leipzig and Murray and people like that could afford to do that, because people just wouldn't buy them. They're not the foreign market kind of collectible, sought after to own, rather than actually just have on your shelf and open.
Anyone added water to this? I just added a bit, and it suddenly became fruitier for me. Kind of like the previous two. The nose for me got kind of nectarines and raspberries, and the palate lost some of the coffee or chocolate bitterness and got kind of tropical fruit salad.
Seems like a wee bit of water.
It's got a bit darker for me. It's got a bit raisiny with water.
They go Oloroso. Yeah, because I find Oloroso quite often can go that way. Maybe that's it, just that little bit of water.
Yeah.
Going that way a bit more.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I don't get kind of heavy sherry taste or nose from this at all. It's quite well balanced.
I can see that raisin coming out more though. What's that water?
Yeah, more of those kind of dark fruits, raisins, like soaked raisins type of thing. But not that sherry sweet at all. And for Oloroso as well, I'm pleasantly surprised.
That'd be my pick of the three so far. That really good drum.
I think that war's really kind of pulled out the Oloroso cask more.
Yeah, you've got to wonder with some of the distilleries how much sherry's left in the cask when they fill it. Some of them seem to be a little bit over sherried. I think there are some SWA regulations, I think, about how much you're supposed to have left in the cask. I think some of them are maybe a bit liberal with the application of the regulations.
I guess arguing that how is SWA going to find out unless they see you doing it? I don't know how many checks and balances there is for that kind of thing. Especially for SWA, if there's a kind of more government regulation, then if it's to do with taxes, then yeah, they're going to make a big point about it. But if it's FWA, then they're able to kind of skirt around that a little bit easier. We go on to the PX. So that's red.
So any particular reason for choosing these five, Shay?
Mostly the ones I had. There's a couple that I picked up in advance of planning on doing a tasting, so I'd had the Defiance Belief for a little bit, just unopened. I saw it on one of some WS releases, and I was like, you know what, for the price, I had a voucher still to use for them for like an extra like a tenner off or whatever. I was like, right, that's probably time to pick something like that up. And it was cheaper than at the time, and that's before Glen Scotia upped the price to 18-year-old. It was cheaper than the standard Glen Scotia 18-year-old for single cask strengths version of it. Like, yeah, seemed like a kind of worthwhile pickup. The What Whiskey was just, we're going to Campbelltown. It was there or something. It's a kind of relatively reasonable price for cask strength whiskey. It was £50. It's not ridiculous. The Peated PX, I've been loving the Glen Scotia festival releases for the last couple of years, so it kind of made sense to me to kind of just take a punt on that one. And more of the two shop picks, those were picked up when I was thinking about doing the tasting. They were more like, okay, you know, do this tasting, that helps to like kind of fill it out and have more, I guess, kind of unique bottlings out there that, you know, still keeping it. All of these are, I mean, the least limited of them would be Campbelltown Malts Festival release. It's all kind of stuff that is small outturns. I mean, the What Whiskey is 150 bottles. The Defies Belief is 202. It was 304 for the Royal Mail Whiskies. For the Robbies, it's 311. I don't know the exact outturn for the festival bottling, but it's, you know, in the thousands rather than the hundreds. So stuff like, again, rather than just doing like a core range tasting split of Glen Scotia, where a lot of people have tried those and could get access to those, it's things are maybe a bit more unusual and people have been less likely to have tried. So yeah, this is it. Oh, sorry.
This is the red one, is it, at the moment?
Yes, the red, Robbie's Whiskey Merchants, Pedro Jimenez, first fill hogshead it's been finished in, and it's 55.6% and at 8 years old. It's interesting reading the notes for this one though, because it doesn't sound like what I'd expect PX. But I'll see what it actually kind of smells and tastes like, but in terms of what its notes are, it doesn't sound like how I'd traditionally view PX cast to kind of come out. PX scale there just at the very end for me. Like it really kind of sweetens up at the end. It is a sweeter whiskey all through, but the PX kind of, I feel, comes right at the end of it. What do the rest of you think in this one?
I'm such a sucker for this kind of whiskey. It's just, yeah, really just about dirty enough. Lovely mouthfeel. There's a bit of fruit hanging at the back, but it's burnt fruit, which I really like. There's that nutty edge to it. White pepper. Yeah, I mean, the balance is great for me. So I'm simple to please when it comes to something like that.
So their notes for it were fresh vanilla pod and lemon posset, followed by red apple and sweet caramel sauce, and then there are candied citrus peels, peach, and sugared almonds.
I got toffee apples, Christmas cake, and prunes and syrup on the nose.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was closer to that. I'm closer to that than the official notes. I don't get anything from the official notes. I think we nicked that lovely peppery spice again at the end. A little bit of Christmas cake type of thing. Those kind of dark fruits and maybe glacy cherries type thing, but not a big cherry bomb type thing. And I know it's not a big cherry bomb, but it's not overpowering for me. That's quite nice.
It's good to hear you saying that as well, because I know you say like you're not really that into sherry cask stuff, and most of it being like three of the five being quite sherry influence. At least it's nice to hear that like you're still enjoying them as much as I think from the sounds that like you're quite similar to me in that with tastings. It's not about loving everything. It's interesting.
And that's why I do whiskey tastings, and that's why we do them in the pub and things as well, because I'll try things that I wouldn't go and buy a bottle of because I would just be prejudiced and go, pre-X, I'm not going to like that. Why would I spend 50, 70 pounds on something I'm never going to drink? But you do, and they're also different. That's the thing, they're also different. Some of them, yes, way overpowering. In the same way as for anybody, any whiskey could be overpowering in one way or another. But yeah, as a general kind of rule, they're my less go-to ones. But some cracking ones out there. I think it was Phil had mentioned in one of the chats before about some of this peated finishes, the more sulfuric kind of PX ones and things like that. They're definitely right up my street. But a straight Glenfarclas or some 25-year-old in a sherry cask and it looks like dark cola, that's not going to do it for me.
I think sherry for me is always like I like to have something that's got a good bit of sherry influence here and there, and especially as an option to have. But more often than not, it's not what I reach towards.
The perfect combo when they get it right is this next dram. The sherry and the pea, if you get it right, mate, that's just ridiculous stuff.
Was that Whiskey Fringe actually? Interestingly, they had cask samples of the next release of Kilkerran cask strengths. So it's got to be a 8-year-old bourbon and an 8-year-old sherry. But the sherry one is really interesting in terms of the last ones. I didn't try the last release, but the previous two were all kind of big, heavy, sulfury ones, which, don't get me wrong, folk loved, or a lot of folk loved. I enjoyed them, but the first one was really up my street. The second one was a bit more hit or miss. I enjoyed it more after I let it sit and open up for a while. But this one is a lot of a much cleaner style sherry, kind of much fruitier. And then actually, I'll talk about a peat and cask feel as well. Obviously, I think a couple of folk in this group have kind of said that as well, peat and port cask as well, kind of being really good. And that's the next long growth. Red is meant to be 24.
Loving the palate in this one, really nice. Neat. It was giving me kind of cough syrup and cherries and kirsch. But then adding some water to it, it suddenly got kind of coffee-ish or dark chocolatey. Really interesting. A lot to this, the different layers here.
Again, those kind of darker notes are more what I'd expect from PX and the notes they've given.
Yeah, it's definitely one I'd want to spend a couple of hours with, nosing it and tasting it slowly over an evening.
I think both those Glen Scotia single casks from Robbie's and Royal Mail are still available if it's of interest. I don't know. It's not a sales thing. I don't make anything from this, so I'm not affiliated with any of those. So, but again, if it's ones that you do really like, I think those ones are still available if they're of interest. That's the thing that kind of interests me most about doing it at tasting with these two. And then the Peter PX next to them is that we got three whiskies that are all very on paper. You're very similar apart from one thing. So it's 8-year-old, all three of them are 8-year-old. It's all sherry finishes. It's one's all so two are PX. And one of the ones that's PX is peated rather than unpeated. They're all variations in the same theme.
I think it's always a sign of a good distillery using their casks properly, though. So you've got the same spirit going in, and like you said, even all being 3 8-year-olds, and I haven't tried the last one yet, but the fact that they can produce something quite different in such a short period of time, and that might not be 8 years in each cask, that's maybe a 2-year finish or whatever. The peat, I imagine, is not going to be overly powerfully peaty, so it's going to be quite gentle. But Glen Scotia, I think, do that really well. They've always produced some really good stuff. Much smaller kind of range than like Glen Murray, who have got 22 different cask finishes and things, but they make some real difference with subtle changes.
I think that's kind of what Clothing Group in a nutshell, although like they're very much more focused on bourbon and refill casks rather than doing big they've done a their special releases have been doing a lot of funky cask stuff with Glen Scotia and all that, but in terms of like what they mostly fill their spirit into, the vast majority of what they fill is bourbon casks at Glen Scotia, by a good margin. And even most of the things you have been in other casks, they've at least been in bourbon for that 5 years before going into something else. That's it. Like going around the distillery as well, it's like it's interesting when you nip round, like you go to see, like you can see the dunnage warehouses and that. And yeah, right. Cool to see they've got them and all that, but the vast majority of their warehouses are big palletized things. They are trying to make the most out of their space. And that's it. They said that was it. Like most of what was getting filled was into first fill bourbon, particularly for their double cask. I think, like they said, for that, the double cask, it's usually like 5 years in first fill bourbon before getting moved into the into a sherry cask. Can we go see what the last one's like then?
Why not?
So again, this one's going to be quite noticeably different to everything else. It's the only one that's got a big peat influence. Well, other ones have mentioned peat. I don't know if they were peated spirit. I don't think they really were, but this one definitely is. So this is the 8-year-old festival edition. I can't see myself here, so I can't tell if it's in the screen or not.
Is that this year's one?
Yeah, that's this year's one. So this is 2022. We did last year was a 10-year-old Bordeaux that was unpeated. And I think that one was, it was nice enough, but I think a lot of people, I found anyway, I didn't like it as much as the prior years. I think, but the prior years were pretty standout, so it's not necessarily fair to say it wasn't bad by any means. It was cheaper than the prior years. Like the 2020 was that 14-year-old Tawny Port. It was about £75. 2021 was the 10-year-old Bordeaux, £50. It's a decent bit cheaper, but I still found it, given the choice, so I definitely went back to the port. So this one's around that same price of £55, a bit younger, but going back to having that kind of good bit of peat influence.
It's a nice, subtle kind of peat influence as well. It's not a big, heavy punch in the mouth. It doesn't kill the whiskey underneath it,
It's a very earthy style. It's not going like that, which makes sense. Kind of more like what have you. Highland peat is generally that more earthy, whereas Isla's goes kind of more often goes kind of medicinal iodine style. This is just going earthy, which is I'm not finding the PX too much on it right now, but more like the peat's kind of dominating for me on it.
That maritime nose really comes through on this, I think. You get the peat and a little bit of like treacle maybe at the back.
Barbecued spare ribs is what I get.
Yes, I know exactly what you mean.
You've got to love a whiskey that makes you hungry.
I found all 5 of these have been sort of quite chewy. I really wanted to bite them, if you know what I mean.
That's it. I find though like quite a few whiskies, not just from my friends, but more and more a lot of whiskies you can attribute to food. More often than not, it's not like you might have an occasion like, oh, it's a smell of something like something you wouldn't eat, but more often than not, it's memories relating to something you'd eat. Whether it's sweets or fruit or whatever. And with these as well, having that good bit of texture to them probably helps, like in terms of that being like what I chew them. It's got a decent bit of weight to it rather than just being, really kind of light and disappears. This one's 56.5%, I should say, as well. So I say all of these have been quite high strengths, but the lowest strengths of these have been 55.6.
I do like that barbecue spare ribs quote there. You get that sweet, sticky kind of smokiness at the end. Not a peaty smokiness, but yeah, spare ribs is a great description.
And this one is saying it is a 12-month finish in Bedroom is specifically for this bottle. It does mention that on the back. And it's not. This one doesn't really have like big tasting notes, right? So it's not one of those single cask bottles. They had their tasting notes. I don't know if they're written by the brand or they're written by the kind of whiskey buyer for the shops or not, or a combination of both. But this one's just got like a short sentence on the tasting of just perfect balance of gentle smoke, treacle, and spice, which sounds quite similar to what some other people have said. That kind of treacle note coming through.
For me, this has got really nice thick texture.
I think quite often you find that peated whiskey does tend to have a kind of more weighty style. Partially, I think more often than not, it'll be the distillation's also been changed to kind of try and capture that smoke. So, like, capture that influence. So they'll go more into the faints, like kind of the earlier side of the distillation rather than into the heads. Like heads gives you that kind of fruitier element. Faints will give you that kind of weightier, heavier, dirtier spirit. But if you go into the heads, it's kind of easier to make a young whiskey palatable. Whereas going to the faints, it's generally either needs heavier cask influence or longer time to mature out some of those what people would maybe consider off notes. Although other people would not consider them off notes. Look at that Carnmore 4-year-old Ben Nevis. I think that was like one of the kind of standouts for it. It was this funky, strange dram. And yeah, like for all intents and purposes, like it would be viewed as this whiskey takes off. It's like all these kind of funky notes that you and I don't want, that people traditionally wouldn't want in their whiskey, but if you're into it, you're all for it. Like candied bacon and maple syrup, like with that, but like being a really, really meaty dram. Anyone else got anything to think on this one?
I still get a bit of a chocolate note on it. It's been consistent with 2 or 3 of them, and I'd not necessarily picked that up before, but I think that's been really interesting. I've drunk a few Scotias, but I've not done 5 like this. And so it's the first time I've been able to notice a sort of a Glen Scotia DNA that's running through them, which is really interesting. That doesn't mean I'll be able to pick one out of a blind lineup, but it's interesting.
I think for me,
Always a challenge.
Sorry, can I go?
I'm just going to say it's always a challenge, and once you've had a tasting like this, where you've had 4 or 5 in a row from the same distilleries, is to pick out the new make characteristic and then recognise it later on. I think I've failed every time I've tried to do that.
I think for me, Glen Scotia, and it's not always the easiest thing to kind of pick out like blind, because spice can come from anywhere, but a lot of Glen Scotias I've had have like noticeably kind of spicy character to them, which I'm all for. I really, really enjoy. But it can be easy to kind of get that mixed up with something else, especially because some casks can even kind of bring that in, or just be a younger spirit, or could be a bit prickly. That can kind of be viewed as spice in some way.
But I mean, I've loved the festival edition. So I didn't have the Ruby, which was the first one, although I've tried it. I didn't own a bottle, but I had the rum and then the Tawny and the Bordeaux. I had it, but it passed me by. But when I got this one, I loved it. I mean, but it was always that treacle note that dominated. But now, possibly because of the way we've drunk them, it's more the spicy note actually that's dominating for me, that white pepper and that chocolate. Mm-hmm. So it reminds me again that whatever you've had before programs your palate in a different way. And so you take different things from the whiskey, which is really interesting.